And welcome once again to another edition of Footnotes. Pastor Mark here, and today I'm joined by a very important person, Chief Executive Officer. And we don't get this opportunity much, but we have a big wig from Life Action Ministries with us today, Donny Vanker. Donny, welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
We're glad to have you. Donny's full of humility. He's smiling. He's embarrassed that I said he's important. He says he's not important. But I'm so thankful that you are with us this week and just the opportunity to sit down with leadership at the global ministry called Life Action.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do today is just help our listeners understand really what Life Action is, the direction that they're going, and the benefits that they offer. And so here on Footnotes, we're going to explore all there is to know about who we are and who God has made us to be.
Awesome.
All right, so Donny, let's get into it. We're going to talk today, really three questions are going to frame our discussion. So number one, I asked you, why don't you tell us really what is the focus of Life Action today? Because there's a lot of people that I encounter who say, well, I don't know what Life Action is.
Right.
I was just telling you that just this week we have Life Action here at Broadway, and our members may know what Life Action is, but they may not really know what the focus of Life Action is. And during this week that you guys have been here, I've had two friends come to visit us. One is a church planter in Thailand, and the other, they're former members from Texas. And both of them said to me, when I told them you were here, literally, I don't know what Life Action is, but I guess if you're having them, they must be okay.
That's incredible.
So there's people who have no clue.
Yep.
I've heard of that, but I don't know what that is. And really, some of our church members might have preconceived ideas from the past, and they may say, oh, well, I know what it is. But what I want you to do is the leader of the pack is tell us what is the focus. And you and I have been talking about that focus. It's been really interesting. Then I want to just hear about your methods for that focus and let that frame our discussion. And finally, the benefits of the focus and the methods combined together really have benefits for our lives personally as Christians, as husbands, wives, children, believers who want to follow Jesus.
Got it.
Let's jump into it. So number one, Donny, the focus of Life Action today under new leadership. Now, you've been there 3 years.
Just about 3 years, yep.
You told me that you left performance.
I did, yes.
What did you call it? Not ministry, but performance.
No, yeah, it was really a human performance conglomerate. There's a couple dozen different companies. Did a lot of work with pro and Olympic athletes primarily, so a lot of contracts with pro sports teams like the Detroit Red Wings or the New York Mets or and on and on. But also did a lot of work with folks with disabilities, actually spinal cord injuries, cerebral palsy, stroke victims. So it was really one of the if not the world's foremost place when it comes to the neurological side of physiology. So very complex and integrated place. And I was in pastoral ministry before that. I've been in and out of the business world, and I had done that for 7 years. I was the chief of staff, chief operating officer before Lord called us back up here to Life Action.
Wow. So God called you out of the business world. You became the chief executive officer at Life Action, and you guys are taking a particular focus. So tell us, what is the focus of Life Action?
Yeah, great question. So Life Action has been around for over 50 years, and I would actually say that we've just been refocusing, making sure with the transition of leadership that we're not changing our DNA or our mission. And so we've spent a lot of time, and I can tell you that what we're doing, Life Action is all about helping churches, families, and leaders move towards revival, vitality, and mission. That's what we do. And in many ways, we exist to be a resource for the church. Revival, it literally means life again, life back. And so there's different ways that looks and that happens. And in many ways, you can think of us when Paul talks in Ephesians 4 of the APEST gifts: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, designed for the equipping the body for the work of service. Most local churches do a great job with pastors and teachers, and that's what they've got nailed down. That's their role. I think of apostles as they're tilling new soil. Those are your church planters. The prophets and evangelists, well, that's Life Action. And that's where we come in. It's hard to be a prophet in your hometown. You've got no honor. So, but people still sometimes need to be moved outside of their normal life, and they need to hear timeless truth of God in a timely manner, a timely spot, and they need to be reminded of the good news of the Word of God. And so that's Life Action. We come in from out of town. We have a lot of our messaging in our structure is designed to be exhortive, to get people to move, encouragement, consolation, a lot of what you look at for how Paul describes New Testament prophecy, and evangelists. We put practical handles on the good news of God. That's our messaging, and so that's really the role that we play for the North American church, and now beyond. There's a lot of work that we're doing not only with pastors but also with missionaries as well. It's a big part of our future here.
Yes, so you guys are refocusing even there where you've just been American churches. I was talking with another one of your leaders not long ago, and there's now a focus to encourage missionaries,
absolutely,
those who are on the front lines. You want to encourage pastors.
What we're finding as the world in the last 50 years, the world has changed a lot. The world's changed a lot even in the last few years, and the same type of challenges that they're facing on the mission field are very, very congruent with the challenges that pastors are facing in America today. I mean, there are some distinctives, of course, depending on where you're at, but a lot of the internal pressures that exist. A lot of the relational pressures that exist are just astronomical, and the recidivism rates, people going out onto the field and just melting down within a couple of years, it's just unsustainable. And we do the same thing with pastors. That is not necessarily new work, but it's just an expansion and advancing into new territory for us. Life Action actually is one of the original reasons why, going all the way back, why we do multi-day events for as long as what we would do, is because we would realize that when we would come in, and God willing, the Lord would use us, and He'd really stir up the pot and be able to get to the deeper issues in people's lives that they're dealing with. Well, and then when we're out, we're in and out, and the pastors are the ones that have to deal with it. And quite frankly, a lot of times the Lord is doing a work in their life and in their heart as well. And so we originally extended our time so that we could have more time with the pastors and the staff, so we could care for them, develop friendships, develop relationships with them, and then carry that on. So we've been looking to build what are other ways that we can resource pastors and ministry leaders, what are other ways that we can care for them, just to help supplement, because it's not just about getting the heart to beat. We've got a bunch of vital organs. And so the vitality. How can we help not only people to come back to Jesus? How can they stay with Jesus? How can they keep that fire going? And so we've been looking to continually find other ways that we can resource and help pastors.
I love that, because the church, you want to bring revival, but
That's
for
right.
pastors, you want to bring encouragement. What are some specific ways you guys have tried to refocus yourself to encourage pastors and, by proxy, missionaries and those who are on the field?
Yeah. So about 20 years ago, we acquired a property that our founder had prayed over with his successor for many years, that we could have a physical place where we could bring pastors and their spouses to be able to come and encourage them. And so we would hold different retreats and types of conferences that would be there. So whether we're on site at your place or you could come to us, so we could have concentrated time and just be a trusted friend. And we would often customize our interactions, with folks depending on what they're bringing. And everybody's bringing different things, depends on the stage of their life and the condition of their church and what the Lord's doing. But there are other resources that we've been looking at. And what are things that we can do, especially when it comes to relational health? When you're a leader, leadership anywhere can be really lonely. And it can be really lonely when you are a leader in vocational Christian work. I've heard it said before by a friend of mine. He said that it's the only job in the world where you are required to win, both at work and at home. And in today's day and age where, we live in the age of transparency, so anything that you do can be broadcast out to the world. And what we're finding is that it creates a real sense of isolation for a lot of folks that are in vocational ministry, and they don't know who to trust. Many pastors actually are lonely, don't have a ton of friends. It's not because they don't want them. It's just They're just, you get beat up on all sides, and so develop a thick shell and just don't know where to be vulnerable and who, how do you let somebody in to care for you. So knowing that in mind, we're constantly been looking for what are resources and what are different methods that we could have to provide so we can care for God's shepherds. And so there's been a variety of different things. We've been recruiting different staff to be able to help us with that, just really formalizing some different things that we have been doing informally and intuitively for a long time. And this last year, actually, we just incorporated a ministry called the Consentia Group that essentially provides a lot of tools and packages around some assessments that really is called the SDI 2.0, and you're going to see some life action events coming out here in the next couple of years that focus on these assessments, but they help get people to understand what motivates them. Mm-hmm. When they're waking up in the morning. So what are the things, the conflict sequence? We all have conflict. How can you know when somebody's going into conflict? And then just some different strengths deployment inventory. And what we found is it's just so very helpful. A lot of times pastors, the issues that they're facing, it's not that they don't understand, what they're reading in the Word of God, and it's not that they don't have passion and energy for that, but it's conflict within their staff teams, it's conflict within their families and other relationships. And if they can manage those things better, they're just better equipped to be able to do the work of service.
You were talking about the isolation and the loneliness of being a pastor. There was a viral vlog that went around, or blog, I don't know the technical term, from Reverend Alexander Lang. Okay, I don't know if you saw this. Why he left his church. He has been the senior pastor at First Presbyterian Church of Arlington Heights in Texas. I believe it's Texas. And he wrote this blog to say, I'm leaving ministry. And I'm going to give you the reasons why I'm leaving. I'm not only leaving this church, I'm leaving ministry. So some of the reasons that he lists, and I'm looking at this on a website right now, and I'm trying to assimilate, but he says, first of all, you've got 1,000 bosses.
Right. Impossible.
It's impossible to please people. There's unrealistic expectations. Like you said, I mean, how many people work a job right now, and there may be a demand that they be moral in the job?
Yeah.
Okay, like if you're an accountant, you have to be moral with the numbers and the figures, but the company does not care if you have your marriage fall apart.
Couldn't care less.
Or if your children are disobedient and they're not exactly where people think they should be, or whatever. But yet the pastorate is this incredible calling of, you must urge people to be moral, and you must be moral, and then your family must be moral, and which that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't think people sitting in the pew listening to me fully grasp the 1 Timothy chapter 3 expectations that are mostly internal on a pastor.
Sure.
Mike Huckabee once said, being a governor of a state and being a pastor, because he did both.
Yeah, he did. Interesting.
He said they're about the same thing, but I'd take being a governor. The pastor was harder. I'm
not surprised.
And I think that's true. Yeah. This man from Arlington Heights, another few reasons he listed, I think this was the most powerful to me. I feel this. He said, you have to wear too many hats. I have to be a professional speaker.
That's right.
And you feel that because I'm going to tell you, people want your time all week long, but then when they come sit in the pew, they become critics.
Yeah, and they expect you to perform.
It better be good.
Yeah, that's right.
I brought my friends.
That's right.
You better knock it out of the park. Professional speaker, you got to be a CEO. You got to be a counselor.
Yep. Dealing with life's most difficult scenarios.
Crazy scenarios that people have not been able to solve themselves. They've already been to 6 counselors already, and all these family members, and then they come to you, and you want to help them, but it's like, I don't even know if you're telling me the truth.
Right. Yep.
This is the next one, fundraiser.
Right. Oh yeah, it's huge.
I mean, we're in a debt reduction campaign. I'm a fundraiser.
Yeah.
to get rid of a debt I did not incur,
Right.
to do things that need to be done. And
Right.
a human resource director, how
Sure.
many times are you meeting with staff members all day long, trying to master of ceremonies, pillar of virtue? Now, this is what this Lang pastor in Arlington said. Again, he's the guy who wrote this.
Sure.
I'm not saying this. But you hear it and you go, well, he's exactly right. You have to wear like 6 different hats. You have all these unmet expectations, and it's extremely lonely. People don't want to be the pastor's friend. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, people my age, and we encountered this moving.
Interesting.
They don't want to touch you.
Right.
You can tell. Now, no offense. I get it, right? Because it's going to get personal.
Yep.
It's going to get personal. And so
they don't know if they want to be associated with you or not, depending on what other people are going to say or what they're going to leverage against
whatever
you.
they do in their off time. Is the pastor going to approve of that?
That's right.
Is it
That's right.
going to be awkward? I mean, I get it. It's a very awkward, weird thing.
And it's not just hard on you, on your spouse. It's, again, they're impossible expectations that are put on you. It took me a little while. Look, I'll be honest. When I left pastoral ministry, and it was mostly I was doing student ministries at a pretty large church for a while, and did some great things and made some big mistakes too. And then was doing some student ministries, then adult small groups, and was an associate pastor for a little bit. Kind of my next step would have been to probably to plant a church, within the organization we're at. And I love Jesus, but I just said, man, I can't do this anymore. When I tell you that my desire to go back into vocational ministry was a 0 out of 10, it was a 0 out of 10. And same thing for my wife. And we loved Jesus, and we were serving at the local church. It wasn't like there wasn't a crisis of faith that we had, but just the demands and expectations were just astronomical. And I really think that in the Western church, we are pastor-centric and not Jesus-centric.
That is correct.
And we expect our pastors to be Jesus, who's way up here, and they expect us to be here. But we're all down here. It doesn't mean that there's not responsibilities that we have. I mean, there's burdens of leadership. But Jesus is the pastor. Jesus is the shepherd, and we're not him, and that's okay. But boy, it's so you were asking about some of our methods, and why do we do what we do?
So I want to move to the methods.
Yeah.
So the focus, you guys have this great focus that I love, and I will just echo something you said. You guys coming here, my wife said, I think you benefit more than anybody else. And I think that's true, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because the emotional strain it takes, and I'm not complaining.
No.
But just recently, one of my children confessed, it's hard with our school and our church and the expectations that are on me as the pastor's child.
Yep.
It is unfair and it is difficult.
Yep.
And nobody's putting those expectations on the teacher's kid. I mean, maybe they do to some degree, but they're really putting
not to the same degree.
Whether anybody believes that or not, they are putting that on. But the Lord sustains, right? The Lord keeps us. The Lord holds us. So all that this Lang guy wrote, I mean, it resonates. All that you've seen with Life Action, yes, it resonates. But yet at the end of the day, it does take kind of a crazy person.
It does
to be a pastor, and I'm a little crazy, so that's okay. That's all right. That's the only reason we stay.
I love it.
Is a little crazy.
Yeah.
You got to be a little off, but the Lord sustains, and I love Life Action. So if it benefits no one else, I need it as the pastor. I need you to come in and say these things that you're saying, and I need them to hear somebody else say it. Just like a parent needs somebody else to say it to their kids.
That's exactly right.
I need somebody else to validate this. And so I always love it just for my own heart.
That's
it's
so
good for me. Now, I don't know if it's good for anybody else, but it's good for me.
Well, part of our methods and on why we do this, it is for the pastor and their staff. We have been in many, many churches where the pastor and his wife have come up and said, look, we've not been able to worship together in 20 years until you came. That happens constantly because of the demands that are placed on you and your family on Sunday mornings, and it creates difficulty. So when we come it allows you to be with your people and to be able to worship the Lord, to be near Him, to get all together. So you're all experiencing the same thing together. And it doesn't, you're not taking off your leader hat, but you get to lead by being together with them. And a lot of times, with churches, whether it's different types of events that we do. A lot of times, by the time that event is done, the staff are fried. They're exhausted. Your key volunteers are just toast. And so it's part of why the way that we structure what we do is so that you can be refreshed and encouraged. We found that, and this was the main issue that Jesus had with the religious leaders of his day. And in fact, it was always an issue, is just an abject neglect of the principle of the Sabbath. And, we just, the way that we structure life, for many years in ministry, especially if you're in vocational ministry, it was an expectation, ministry is 24/7, 7 days a week. That's neither holy nor healthy. And so it's almost, in many ways, that's us reading all of these principles of the Sabbath, all these principles that God has for us to rest. It's for our good. And we just ignore it. And we do it under the pretense of, I'm working hard. But in many ways, when we take a Sabbath, it's a step of faith, always was. That we're going to trust that God's going to do the work for us when we're not working, and we God has that for us to rest and to breathe. And so we're trying to come in and give you a chance to literally to breathe. In Exodus 31. In chapter 20, God's given the 10 Commandments, and the next 11 chapters, he's talking about how to sanctify the tabernacle and the priests and the garments and all of these things, and he's wrapping up. 32 is when he goes down. Moses goes down, he sees the golden calf and all that. But so God's wrapping up all these instructions, and he says, and above everything I've just told you, honor the Sabbath, keep it holy. And he says, because it's me that sanctifies you. And then even when he describes, it's the only place I found when he describes what he did he created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, it says he rested and was refreshed. Super interesting. And the word in Hebrew has to do with the word breath. It's like, and he took a breath. So a life action, we want to be a breath of fresh air for you and for your churches. And so why we structure what we do and how we do it, there is some strategy behind that, so we can give you a chance to really breathe.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
Ironically, though, people hear God say, rest on the Sabbath and seek me, and they say, well, that's not rest.
Yeah.
Rest is me going to the lake, or me going to the golf course, or me sitting around watching Desperate Housewives. Yeah. That's not rest.
Yeah.
Going to church is not rest. But I think we misunderstand the definition of rest. God's rest is in Him.
Yeah, it doesn't mean do nothing.
It doesn't mean do nothing. Yeah, they're confusing a day off, which you should have, as don't do anything on this day. And Life Action comes in, and you keep us very busy. So it's work.
Right.
This Sabbath breath of a week is work on our people. And they may say, well, this is not breath to me.
Yeah.
I've still got all my responsibilities and all these things to do. Yet, the breath is to come and meet God. He is the sustainer.
That's right.
He is the bread of life.
That's right.
That's the challenge for all of us. That's the challenge with the Sabbath. It's the challenge with Life Action. It's the challenge with anything that we set that time aside to seek God. He will strengthen us. We have food, that others know not of.
That's right. That's right. We live in a culture today where it is so busy. Steve was talking about this just the other day in one of our sessions, and we glorify how busy we are. And I'll tell you, when I was younger, people saw me on college campus, and they'd say, Donny, I never see you when you're not running somewhere. They'd say, well, how you doing? I'd say, man, I'm tired. I'm interning at the church 30 hours a week, and I'm doing this and that and this and that. I'm just going and going. And of course, every time we meet together, even the priests, in a sense, they were still working. Jesus was trying to help them understand. So even the priests in the tabernacle, they were still doing work. Look, if there's dishes that need to be cleaned, if the toilet overflows, there's still some things you're going to, some of the basics you're going to do. But to be able to set aside concentrated time to be with the Lord, is what we try and do, and just be able to take a breath. That's, there's so much of life, the word revive and life back, life again. I tend to think of life as this combination of freedom, hope, and energy. But it's when something is breathing, it's alive. When it's not breathing, it's dead. And so to be able to breathe life back into people, into marriages, into relationships, into churches, I mean, that's what we try to do, and we try to structure things in that way. And the reality is every church is a little bit different that we go into, so we do customize what we do depending on the needs of the people. Try to talk with the pastors, try to talk with the staff, and spend time talking with the Lord. I really think of prophecy. It's timeless truth of God. You're not going to hear something that probably from us that you haven't heard before, right? But it's applied in a timely manner. God always had his people, his prophets were speaking to a particular group, to a particular community, to a particular person. It's something that was just going to go right to their heart, something that they didn't have peace with, that they're wrestling with, and so that's when we're structuring. We're trying to listen to God and listen to y'all as well, see how can we best benefit you.
I'm thankful for that focus.
Yeah.
Let's go to the second point. So you guys now have a method that you're applying, and I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
I use the word interest.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. So Paul Johnson, who was a historian, wrote a rather large book called A History of the American People.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite books. It was a favorite book, ironically, in the Reagan White House.
Interesting.
A lot of the aides and young people there were carrying around that book. I was introduced to it about 25 years ago, and I really have enjoyed it, the way he writes about American history. In the book, he talks specifically, and this is something that triggered when you were telling me about your method. Mm-hmm. He talks about Washington and what Washington firmly believed, that men were motivated by interest.
Yep.
The word then was interest. The word now would be motivation.
Sure.
Or internal desire, whatever.
Yep.
But the idea was Washington was smart enough to understand that the way people work is there's something that interests them. So whether it's you want a commission into the regular army of the British and you can't get it because you're a colonial, or you want to be able to own and have a particular state of wealth and you can't achieve that's your interest, you can't get it because of the system that's been set up against you. So he talks about interest. And Johnson, the author, just capitalizes on this in his book and talks about how interest is what really drove these men to seek revolution. Above all things, it was what motivated and interested them. Now, you tell me that Life Action has discovered kind of a methodology that pinpoints not only behavior. So there's a lot of behavioral tests out there. I've benefited from them. And
Sure.
I'm just going to say, Donny, I know people who are Christians who say all that stuff is evil.
Right.
You need to go to the Bible.
Right.
And that's good, but I would also say that, yes, go to the Scripture. Let Scripture be
Of
authoritative.
course. Of course.
Let it be the rule. Let it be the top and the head and the king. But there's also other things that people have discovered that are very, very helpful. And
That's right.
I wasn't a believer in the DISC, the DISC, until I took it, and it pinned me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like it's reading your mail.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. Suddenly I understood things about myself
Yeah.
that I had not previously been able to articulate.
Yeah.
So now you tell me, well, DISC is good, but DISC is really the surface. It's the behavior. What we're trying to get to, and we're trying to use this in our training, in our encouragement, in our teaching, is really getting to the motivation
Yep.
of what drives a person through, as Paul Johnson would say, interest.
Yes.
So tell us
Yes.
about that. What's the method?
Yes. Okay. So we discovered a ministries called the Consentia Group that had taken this scientific tests and been able to help us contextualize these types of assessments through a biblical framework. So it's really marrying both of those things. The tests themselves are called core strengths, and they work with all types of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, and essentially there's an assessment that you do, and it helps to be able to validate, where do you fall, in which percentages of these areas are what motivates you. Essentially, that you're looking at what they call performance, people, or process. The last one would be perspective, which is kind of in the middle. And we're all different pieces of all of these things. They found that what motivates people really doesn't change after the age of 4. Now, strengths and weaknesses, what we're good at and what we're not, those are like muscles. So it depends on, some of us are naturally strong in some areas and naturally weak in others. And the more you work at something, the stronger you get. And so it helps with identify the strengths, it helps identify the overdone strengths. It also helps identify what's the conflict sequence, that we tend to have a predictable sequence when we're in conflict, when the deep needs of our soul are not being met. How do we respond? And so, some of the advantage of it really is to be able to understand yourself and understand those around you. And we're told to live with your spouse in an understanding way. Well, how are you going to do that unless you take the time to really assess and to learn about those things? And if you know what really drives somebody, what motivates somebody, it'll help you be in tune really with their heart and with their thinking. And if you can understand why somebody makes decisions, doesn't that help you to be able to relationally be able to understand and benefit them? And we found that those the people, process, and performance, it really aligns with what we call the 3 passions of the soul. So the guy who created the content that we've incorporated into Life Action, his name is Dr. Bruce Terpstra. And he was served in a bunch of different denominations. He oversaw, I think, 400 church plants in the Northeast at one point. Has really pursued this a long time. And he talks about the 3 passions of the soul that would really be acceptance, significance, and security. Those match up with those different, with the science side. That's what this matches up with: acceptance, significance, and security. And in many ways, it's in many ways, it matches up with what the things that we're looking for from God. Are you good? Are you wise? Are you powerful? We would say that there's not this God-shaped hole inside of us. There's this God-shaped vacuum. We will find those things: acceptance, significance, and security. If we don't find them fully and completely in God, we will find those things in something. We'll find them in our work. We'll find them in perhaps in some kind of destructive relationship or some type of idolatry. Those are cravings of the soul. And so as we can identify, how are we feeling those things? Where are we not trusting the Lord for those things? And how does that play out into our relationships? We're actually able to use assessments and use things that can help us draw those out, so that when we're talking with people, it can not only help them really be able to understand and get right in their relationship with God, but they get to see how that's spilling out, good and bad, into the relationships with others. And so it's all designed. So much of Life Action, what we do is just help people have that right relationship with God and then right relationships with others, getting rid of bitterness and having peace and having that gospel be transferable. And this is just more practical tools that we have to keep that going.
Because one thing that is said so often at your ministry events, we're not telling you anything new.
That's right.
None of this is groundbreaking theology where you go, I didn't know that.
That's right.
But it's not often what's new, it's what we should do.
That's right.
I noticed this. I taught pastors for 10 years at a seminary in Texas. I taught preaching and pastoral ministry and church administration. And in preaching, what I always noticed about the young, restless, guys who loved the Scripture, they falsely believed that truth made a sermon.
Right.
Let me just give you truth. And let me give you all this truth at once. Let me give you the whole barn today. And many of them even thought, well, if I say it, that settles it.
Right.
I told you that.
Right.
I shared that with you all. I explained that. We said it. And I even see it with our young guys here on staff, because we're going through preaching right now. We're reading some books on preaching, and I'll be addressing this with them. But it's funny because they think, well, we said that in the new members class. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you said. But, we covered this. Why is everybody not doing it? Because you falsely believe that if you just tell them even truthful things, that somehow fixes it. That is only the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not about learning necessarily. That's part of it. That's one side of the coin, definitely, 50%. The harder thing as I grow older, and I don't know how you feel because we're probably the same age.
Yeah.
It's not what I need to know anymore. It's what I need to live.
It's how to apply it.
And that is
That's
the
right.
hardest thing.
It
And the
is.
older I get, the more I realize I have a lot of head knowledge
Yep.
about God.
Yeah.
I don't need another book on the Trinity.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't need another one.
Yeah.
These guys go to these conferences, look at these books, and I love books. You go to
Sure.
my office, there's a billion of them.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm getting to this point where
Yep.
I'm like Solomon, there's no end to this.
Yep.
There is no end to this.
Yeah.
My problem is I wake up some mornings and my heart is so prideful and I don't even want to talk to God.
Yep.
Now, what book's going to tell me that?
That's right.
About that? Or, lust. What man doesn't deal with just...
Of course.
And it doesn't have to be lust of the flesh. It can be lust of money. It
Yep.
can be lust of achievement. One thing I was convicted of last night, you life action people, y'all are just so convicted. Steve said, turn in the book to this back page, and the Holy Spirit, one of the things on that back page, it was, you're prideful if you're driven by success. And the Spirit said, that's you. Mm-hmm. That's you are so prideful. For whatever reason, I feel this incredible weight being a new pastor in a new location.
Yeah.
We've got to get this right. We got to win.
Right.
And it's all on me, and really it's not me. It's the power of the Lord. It's His strength. And so, you realize, that's pride.
Yeah.
That's pride that you have to give it up. It's His kingdom. It's His church. And if everybody walks out and this whole thing falls apart, God is in control.
That's right. That's right.
But that's easier said than lived. And so that's what I'm saying. The older I get, the harder it is to really live these things.
Yes.
So I don't necessarily need people telling me new things. I need people reminding me of the old ways and saying, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. You're going in the right direction.
That's exactly right. I spent a good part of my time, first couple of years, with Life Action because what we do is so unique. having these multi-day events at churches, 4, 8, 11, 15-day events, and all of these conferences, and I was just trying to figure out what is this, what is the sauce, that, because I'm listening to the message and I'm like, this is the gospel. Like, why are there so many lives that are being transformed? I mean, I've got it. Every year we're in front of about 35 to 40,000 people for multiple day stuff, not just a one-off thing here. So it's a lot, and just thousands and thousands and thousands of testimonies of significant radical life change, and spend a lot of the time really trying to understand what is the messaging pathway. It might come out 1,000 different ways, but what are we trying to walk people through? And I would tell you today that it's the practical application of the gospel. So we call them our 7 responses to God, and this is what they are: honesty and humility. Together, I'd call those brokenness. Kind of like head down, hands up. My name's Donny Vanker, and I'm a whatever. I need help, right? But God's near the brokenhearted. So honesty and humility, repentance, turn about face. There's a different way. There's compassion, receiving and giving compassion, receiving it from God, giving it to others, receiving and giving forgiveness, radical obedience, and kingdom first living, or kingdom action, and it's a pathway. It's not just a topical thing, because we could come in just focusing on radical obedience, and if we could say, well, hey, God is the king, He's sovereign, He's in control. You're not. You need to submit and obey. Well, that's true, but taken in isolation, what's the good news there? That same message could be said in just about any house of worship, Christian or not. Right, where is the good news there? But when you look at as a totality of it, the honesty, you can be honest. This is where we do those assessments. You can be honest with yourself and see yourself as you are, and come to God as you are, not as you ought to be, and He will not reject you. Is that not the good news? Humility, you can be in a low estate, and God will meet you there. That's good news. Repentance, there is a different way. That's a good thing. There's a way that leads to life, and you can turn to it. Compassion, that God looks at you with favor. God is for you. We've actually realized that once people, during our events, the big turning point in people's lives is when they realize that God is for them. that despite all of these things, that God has their best interest at heart and is for them. And that's good news. Receiving and giving forgiveness, no matter what you have done, God can forgive you from that. And that no matter what's happened in your relationships, God can make those new. It might not be what it was, but he can make them new. Good news. God will never call you to do something that he won't empower you to do. He doesn't want to set you up for failure. He wants to set you up for fruitfulness. In kingdom action, that there is a way of life that you can bless this world. It's the practical application of the good news. That's what we do.
Great method.
Great
method. Now you have me wanting to know what drives me. What drives me and why? What are my interests?
I'm going to get you set up with one of our assessments here. I will.
A test. I need all the help I can get, brother. That's just between you and me.
I'm with you.
I need all the help I can get. So, okay, very good. So, some of this we've answered, but let's say it anyway formally. Sure. The third question that frames our discussion: how will this benefit individuals that walk with Jesus, families, the church?
We all need to be reminded of those very things. It's amazing when you look at those gifts, the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. We tend to think of evangelists as for outside of the church, but there Paul says it's for the church. It's for the equipping of the church, evangelists, because we need to be reminded of the good news. Because we're inundated with bad news. We get bad news every day, not just on the from the news and on our phones, but in our lives. And we get good news too. But the good news of God, that God is for us. So often we interpret experiences in life. We get put in some kind of a vice. Something difficult or challenging happens, and we're faced with having to answer the question: is God doing this to me, or is God doing this for me? And you get asked that enough, and sometimes we question: is God for me? And so we have to be reminded of these things. We have to have times of refreshment, times of encouragement. And really one of the things, and this even goes back to the methodology, is we know that times of genuine transformation, they most often happen in the context of relationship. And they happen also when you're outside of your normal everyday activities. Even just when I look back at my life, and when I was a youth pastor, I would just beg people to go to camp. I mean, whatever I could do to get somebody to go to camp or to retreat, because I knew that we could get like 6 months, at least 6 months worth of ministry work done in a few days. Because there's this exponential impact that happens when you get consecutive hours, consecutive days together. And I experienced that in my life. Some of the deepest transformational times I had with God were during, outside of the normal routine. And so that's partly why, just in terms of how we frame things, is to be able to create these experiences. Because that's really how we learn so much in these experiences, and we create those for the churches. And we've, going forward, you will see in the next couple of years a variety of different marriage and family retreats that we'll bring, whether it's on site at at churches or in different places. There's going to be a host of other resources that we're going to have. Our calling is to resource the church, and especially to resource the church's leaders, the pastors and ministers. So that's
benefit and longevity.
That's right. That's right. The
church people, families, pastors.
That's right. So it's sometimes we need to be disoriented before we're reoriented the right way. All of us have to have times like that, weekly, right, and seasonally and annually. But then how do you keep that fire burning? So how can you sustain and be a healthy tree? They don't get a tree that's sick and needs to have some some kind of fertilizer or this and that. They don't just become healthy generally overnight. It takes some time. And our goal is to be able to help people to really thrive, because healthy trees produce healthy fruit. There's not a kind of a tree that's a bad fruit tree. There's apple trees and there's orange trees. It might give bad apples because the tree is sick, but that doesn't mean the tree is not morally bad. It's just it needs some things to be healthy. So we want to create these experiences that will ignite something in somebody's heart, and then also resource them so they can live a thriving life and be able to bear fruit and enjoy the fullness of the life that God has for them.
Yes, ultimately glorify God, benefit the kingdom of God.
That's right.
What an incredible blessing that is, and I'm thankful that you guys do it. Anyway, what a tremendous benefit it is, and I so appreciate you guys coming and being here. Yeah. And I'm thankful that I get to sit down. Oh, I know what it was. So John, so you guys kind of have this interesting setup.
John Avent, our president. Yeah.
John's the president. Yeah. You're the CEO.
Yeah.
I met another guy last night who said he's the chief financial officer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I met somebody else who said they're captain of the enterprise, and I'm like, okay, now how many of you guys are there?
Yeah.
But everybody's got a role, and John tells me one of the benefits that's coming down the line that you guys are starting is coaching.
That's right.
Coaching pastors.
That's right.
So I met John at family camp, and I think it was a God-ordained meeting for me. He and his wife were out there playing mini golf, and she was beating him. And my son, who has a great personality, he got up and he started talking to them. The Lord uses your children in amazing ways. So my son starts messing with them and saying, let's see if you can beat your wife. And so the wife wins, I think, or John, I can't remember. But one of them wins, and it becomes funny, and my son is part of it. And it creates a relationship with John and I. We start up a conversation.
Oh, good.
And so John talks to me throughout the week and just reaches out and says, I would love to get to know your leadership. I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to coach and encourage you.
Yeah.
And John is coached and encouraged by some pretty big people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people like you that's really big, but then there's even other people, dare I say.
John has more relationships than anybody that I know. So John Avent, I mean, I think I want to say four churches, mega churches ultimately within the SBC, and he gave that up in order to come full time with Life Action. He served on the International Mission Board for a number of years. Has a huge heart for missionaries. Has a huge heart for pastors, and he's done a ton of coaching and helping them. It's probably the number one burden on John's heart is how to create sustainable opportunities where we're the friends of pastors and missionaries coming alongside of them.
But I love that. All that we've talked about today, to have a coach, to have somebody to say, talk to me. So he wants to come and meet with our leadership.
That's great.
His wife is going to come in the winter and do a women's conference. And he says, I want to come and I just want to meet with some of your leadership and I want to get to know you so that later if I speak into your life, I know what I'm speaking into and I know what I'm dealing with. I'm so thankful for that. And he tells me that one of his mentors, and this is where our conversation really took off because, of course, when I say this, people will understand why. But he was talking about how somebody who's been a very successful business person and that's Dan Cathy with Chick-fil-A, is a good personal friend to John and,
very much
and
so.
mentors John. And so John tells me the last time we talk, and I'm saying this publicly so that this is held accountable. He says, I'm going to get you to meet Dan Cathy. I'm going to get you, I'm going to bring you down. And so I was talking with, I'm sorry, what is the brother's name who's the CFO?
Well, maybe you saw Rich Cummins, our chief evangelist.
Yes, Rich.
Yeah.
Rich who makes it rich. That's how I remembered his name. He said, we're getting ready to have some events, and we're going to Atlanta, and I think John's going to invite you to that.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Because so hold him accountable to that.
All right.
I want him to coach me, and I want to meet Dan Cathy of Chick-fil-A.
All right. Well, Dan has been a friend to Life Action, and he's been a very long time, a very close friend for John, and John is constantly telling us of ways that Dan was encouraging him and coaching him, and they did a lot of ministry together when John was a pastor down in the Atlanta area, and Dan has been very kind to host a number of Life Action teams, and we, a lot of times with guys like that. They have experienced a lot of success for a reason. They're very good leaders, and there's a lot that we can learn from them, and we do our very best. And so, there will be some opportunities. And I'll make sure to let John know.
That was what I was going to say. I loved his coaching, and then when he said, "And I'm going to get you down there because I know you're interested in all that," and I said, "Absolutely." Yeah. So we'll see.
Okay.
John flies 30,000 feet.
He does.
So let's hope he can stay down on this one issue. But anyway, I appreciate your rationale behind that and how it benefits the local church and what a blessing it is. So, brother, thank you for spending time on the podcast today. I hope people now know a little bit more about Life Action.
Yeah.
And if they say, what is Life Action? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
You guys have a presence, and you're international. You go around to churches, but you also go around encouraging, and
that's right.
What a tremendous blessing.
That's right. Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here and appreciate you welcome us to Broadway. We love this church. Have for a long time, so appreciate it.
Well, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
And that's another episode of our podcast, Footnotes. We drop our podcast each Friday, so be sure to tune in, check us out, and listen. Footnotes is a ministry of Broadway Baptist Church located in South Haven, Mississippi. We're located right outside of the Metro Memphis area. You can learn more about us by visiting us online at broadwaychurch.org. Until next time, it's Footnotes.